I would like to introduce our last speaker of the third session, Ms. Grace Githiri, Urban and Territorial Development Specialist, Policy and Legislation and Governance section of UN Habitat. Ms. Githiri also managed the Urban Rural Linkage Program, which includes implementation of rural-urban linkage guiding principles, work related to smart villages, food systems and nutrition, and small and intermediary cities. Ms. Githiri also supports the National Urban Policies Program, she will be presented today, on thematic areas including health, climate change, and their intersection with legislation and governance. I would like also to invite you to join the menti.com to submit your question, and don't forget to mention who you address your questions to. And top voted question will be selected to be answered directly by the speakers after this session. Thank you. I'll welcome you, Ms. Githiri, to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Really excited to be in this conference, not only in this beautiful city of Balikpapan, having previously traveled from a rural county in China, where I was last week, where we were having another conference on urban rural linkages. And thanks a lot to the host here, but also to the Regional Office of Asia Pacific and the government of Japan. Really excited. So my name is Grace Githiri, and I would like also to comment something about the people of this city. I think you're really very happy people and very hospitable. It has been very interesting few days here in Balikpapan. So I will be sharing about national urban policies. I mainly support at UN Habitat urban rural linkages, but also initiatives on national urban policies, and at the end we'll get to see how national urban policies approach is different or related to national spatial planning frameworks or approach. So you can go to the next slide. So our work on national urban policy. Since yesterday, it has been very interesting hearing the experiences, the insights from different contexts, not only in Asia, but also in Africa, from my colleagues from Kenya, from Uganda, and of course today we'll be hearing from Mozambique. It's quite interesting to hear references to urban policy, and these national urban policies have become famous since the adoption of the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, and also the New Urban Agenda. And more so, referencing now the New Urban Agenda. During the preparation of the New Urban Agenda, NUP was identified as one of the 10 policy units, among others. Others were basic services, governance, capacity building, etc. But NUP was one of these policy units. And apart from that, it was identified as one of the entry points for the implementation of the New Urban Agenda. And it was agreed upon that UN Habitat could support member countries or countries in the development and also in the implementation of NUPs. And this is what, of course, UN Habitat has been doing since 2015, 2016. And something else to mention is that NUP is also proposed as a monitoring tool of the SDG, and specifically SDG 11.8.1. Next slide, please. So what has UN Habitat been doing? Next slide. So UN Habitat has been implementing the work on national urban policies in different ways, and one of them is through supporting, as I mentioned, countries in different phases or in national urban policy process. So far, we have supported 64 countries, and 17 of these are in this region, and majority of them, as you can see, have mainly been in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And more specifically, for example, and also Arab region. Let me mention Arab region as well. So in Africa, we have the largest portfolio on this work. But in Asia Pacific, as well, as I mentioned, 17 countries. Next slide, please. I would also like to highlight that as part of our activities in different regions, we have received support from Korea, where in the first phase, we are able to support 3 countries, Africa, Arab region, and also in this region, specifically Myanmar. And just to mention, in Myanmar context, or in Myanmar national urban policy, one of the things that came up was the need for balanced spatial distribution. And they recommended, or it was one of the recommendation or proposal was the need to develop national spatial development framework to bring the interconnection of the cities because of the system of cities. I remember yesterday several presenters talking about the need to link or connect cities, island to island, urban to rural, city to city, and or region to region. And I think that's what came up from the from Myanmar project. In this second phase, of course, we have the countries that are outlined there. This is the active portfolio currently, not only in Egypt, Azerbaijan, Cambodia presented yesterday, they have a draft plan, and UN Habitat is supporting in that. Mozambique is here, we're also supporting in that, and also Paraguay. But other countries that we have an active portfolio on urban policy are Haiti, Comoros, and Ghana, specifically in Africa, we are supporting in review. They had a plan for they had an urban policy for 2015, and one of the priority issues was, again, territorial development. And currently, we are supporting them in reviewing this policy. Next slide. So, the other bit of UN Habitat work is developing knowledge products, or developing knowledge. Because, as I mentioned, their role is to support countries not only in developing, but also implementing these urban policies. So UN Habitat has been able to come to bring together several tools, several guides, papers, experiences. For example, in 2017, we were able to come up with regional reports, Africa, Asia Pacific, Arab region, regional reports on the state of NUP in this particular context. Next slide. So, but apart from the regional reports, we have had a series of global reports on national urban policy. My colleague yesterday, Mr. Tadashi from OECD mentioned this, that currently we are developing or in the process of developing the 3rd edition. The first edition is in the middle, the second edition is a blue one. The first was basically like a general overview or a scan on national urban policy. The second one narrowed down or used the entry point of climate action, how NUP is being used for climate action in different contexts. And the 3rd edition is blowing this out a bit, including affordable housing, climate action or resilience, and all that, just as my colleague, Mr. Tadashi from OECD mentioned. Apart from the global reports on these knowledge products, we also have the database, NUP database. In 2018, we produced a physical copy, as you can see, the black one. Next slide. But right now, we have it as an online database. In this online database, you're able to get to see for each country. Currently, we have data for 162 countries. What's the state of national urban policy, what's their priority, which agency is responsible, and you're able to analyze. For some of them, we have even the link to the particular NUP document or the PDF document for that particular country. And as, that's the distribution for the different continent or the different regions. Next slide. So apart from developing knowledge products, UN Habitat has also advanced their work on advocacy. Some of you may have attended or may have heard about the international conferences on national urban policy. The first one was in Korea in 2015, later in Paris in France, later in Nairobi. After COVID, we have not yet had another one. And these are platforms that bring together urban practitioners and stakeholders working in urban development to discuss or demystify urban policies and all this. Next slide. The other aspect is capacity development. As I mentioned, this being a core jurisdiction or area of UN Habitat to support countries. Capacity development is the other thing that UN Habitat has been doing. And apart from the online course that is available in UN Habitat Learn, we also have training materials that have currently been implemented or used by over approximately 700 people in different contexts, online, physical meetings and all that between 2019 and now. And we're continuing to expand and advance it to make it user-friendly, to make it relevant probably for planners, for different stakeholders who are interested in particular issues or aspects of urban policy process. Next slide. So, but why national urban policies? And we are in a spatial planning framework, spatial planning conference. Next slide. So, national urban policies and national spatial planning plans both guide inclusive and sustainable development. And even in some context, yesterday when Mr. Tadashi was defining the urban policy, he mentioned something, he mentioned explicit NUPs and also and implicit. And explicit, he mentioned there are those that are specifically national urbanization policies. But we have in some context where they use the vision, the plan, the NSP as the tool for guiding urban development. But basically back to my presentation, so they both guide urban development, but they are distinct in their focus in a very slight way, which we'll see in the next slide. But they are similar because they guide development, they use participatory approaches. We have seen use in the various presentations, we have seen their aim is to address inequalities in the regions, inequalities between urban and rural, and all that. So for urban policy, especially from UN Habitat, three areas or three aspects or thematic issues were identified as operational enablers, and urban planning and design is one of them. Next slide. So you realize that, of course, NUP is creating an integrated approach to urban development, addressing these issues that we are talking about: infrastructure, housing, social amenities, recreation, public spaces, all that we can think about. But of course, NSP, that is the spatial plans, will focus more on the physical layout, thus dictating land use, transportation networks, transportation networks, etc. So they complement each other in that NUP would guide spatial distribution of. So when NUP and NSP approaches are integrated or working together, urban policies can effectively implement, successively and effectively be implemented spatially, and spatial plans would align with broader urban policy goals. And that's why we saw that we could bring in the national urban policies approach in this particular conference. But as I conclude, that's my final slide. As I conclude, coming from urban rural linkages work and also contributing to this particular session, I'd like to mention that in 2019, a resolution on urban rural linkages for sustainable urbanization was adopted by member states during the UN Habitat Assembly, the first UN Habitat Assembly. And one of the things that was assigned to UN Habitat was to support countries in integrating or mainstreaming urban rural linkages in their urban policies, urban development plans, and all that. And currently, we have managed to do this in approximately 13 countries in Africa, trying to expand this to different regions. And on this, again, in Africa, we have a Center for Urban Rural Linkages launched 2 weeks ago at the University of Nairobi. And coincidentally, it's domiciled at the Urban and Regional Planning Department of the university. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you so much. You can go to my last slide where I say thank you. And those are the links in case of anything. Thank you so much.